Don't be too attached to things. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean deny the world. It might mean deny the world if you're too in love with the material, like with material well-being, let's say, then your pathway to transcendence and meaning might be to abandon that because it's constraining you. It's making you less than you could be. But the fundamental lesson, the more fundamental lesson that's underneath that is don't let what you are stop you from being what you could be. Right. And so then the question is, well, what do you identify with? Do you identify with what you are? Then you're a tyrant. Do you identify with chaos? Because that's the opposite of order, say. Then you're nihilistic. Well, you don't identify with either of those. You know that they're both necessary. You know that you have to live with both of them, but you identify with the capacity to continually transcend what you are. And then you seek out error. That's what humility is. It's like, I'm error-ridden. It's like, so I want to put myself in a situation where I can discover one of my errors, hopefully not in a way that's going to knock me completely out of the game, right? I want to seek out a challenge. I want to find out where my limits are. I want to find out where there's not enough of me yet. And I want to do that in a way that's engaging because, you know, you can wear yourself out fighting dragons, obviously. You can exhaust yourself completely, and that's not helpful. You know, one of the things I learned, for example, when I was coaching lawyers, these were people who had very high-end careers, and so they had an infinite workload. No matter how much they worked, flat out, there was always way more work that they should do. It's a very difficult thing to learn to manage. And so they were exhausting themselves, and I said, well, you know, you have to work less per day. It's like, well, no, that's not happening. I can't do that. And so what I learned over time was, okay, so this is what you have to do. Every 3 months, you have to block off 4 days and go have a vacation. And you have to plan that in advance so it's in your calendar so that your secretary doesn't book your time. And then you need that because you have to recuperate enough so that you can work as hard as you're going to work. And of course, they were nervous about that. And I said, well, look, we can calibrate this. Let's keep track of your billable hours over the next year and see if they increase or decrease. Because I bet you if you take more time off, you'll actually have more billable hours. You'll actually have your cake and eat it too. You'll get to have a vacation and you'll be more productive. And that inevitably, that was what happened. And so that's a matter of calibrating the game properly, right? You want to play a game that you can play today, but also one that you can play next week and next month. We're not talking about, you know, your career this week. We're talking about you having a career that lasts 30 years, that doesn't kill you, that doesn't make you hate yourself or the job, that doesn't make you bitter, that doesn't wear you to a frazzle. So it has to be optimized. And so I think that you can, in fact, decide to take on the load that's optimally meaningful if you want, and then you get to have your cake and eat it too. You're on the pathway to continual incremental improvement. You only have to burn off a feather at a time instead of having the whole bloody thing burst into flames. But it's a constant source of renewal. And there's an idea that to be renewed, you have to drink the water of life, right? That's an old mythological idea. And what's the water? The water of life. Chaos is water. Water is chaos. Water is what washes away too much order. And to stay continually, let's say, refreshed by the water of life is to take on exactly the right amount of chaos to make sure that your garden is properly nourished. And I think meaning is actually the marker of that. And Beauty and the Beast, I think, is the best Disney film, all things considered. It's very witty. I like the music. It doesn't moralize. Mm-hmm. It's got a great female hero. It is an investigation into ideal femininity, mm-hmm. and the redemptive power of femininity. And then one of the things that's so subtle about Beauty and the Beast is that you have Gaston, mm-hmm. and Gaston isn't a monster, mm-hmm. but he is, which is why Beauty doesn't like him. He's got everything. He's tall, and he sings that. I've got everything. Look at me. I'm tall. I'm handsome. I'm strong. I'm brave. He's all persona. Uh-huh. Like he's all surface. And he isn't the monster, because the beast is the monster, mm-hmm. but the beast is real. Mm-hmm. And Beauty can see that, and she turns away from the narcissistic persona and pursues the redeemable beast. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if you don't see that that's how human beings interact with each other, you're not looking. Mm-hmm. And women are... And the woman wants the redeemable beast because the redeemable beast has the virtues of the beast. If you want someone to protect you and your infants from beasts, you need someone with the virtue of the beast. And so, but he has to be redeemed because as a beast, he's a beast. That's no, you want a beast in your house? It's like, no, it's not, that's not good. He has to be civilized beast. That's what I'm encouraging young men to be. Civilized beasts.
Do you remember your process of integrating your shadow?
Oh, definitely. I definitely remember that. I think the best practice is to try to not lie. Try to stop lying. Listen to your words. Listen. Feel them. Feel them. Mm-hmm. Are they the right words? Do you believe this? Do you believe what you're saying? Is it true as far as you're concerned? And then you might find that you have something true to say, but you're afraid to. Mm-hmm. Okay, then there's a place for integration of the shadow, because hopefully you can be monstrous enough to say what you believe to be true. And so that means there's a combativeness in some sense in that. And so if you can't do that, so maybe you don't say what's true because you want to be a persona, you want to be nice, you want to appeal to people, you want to be popular, whatever it is you're pursuing. Yeah. You're going to do it in a manipulative way, and you subjugate your truth to that. That's not helpful. Mm-hmm. I mean, well, you're pursuing the road of Gaston in some sense. I mean, he's popular in the village, and he's got a mob behind him, and what's not to like? And that's what he says. Yeah. But beauty she's wiser than that. I started paying attention to how my words made me feel psychologically when I was about 23. I really started to pay attention. And I learned that was worth paying attention to. And I swore that I would strive to not lie, to say what I believe to be the case. And so that was part of the reason why my lectures were popular, say at Harvard and then at the University of Toronto. And before this explosion of notoriety, there was some movement in that direction. I had posted my Maps of Meaning lectures online. A TV station in Toronto had done a 13-part series on the Maps of Meaning course because of the somewhat remarkable student response to the course, because the typical response in the student evaluations, the typical comment was, this course changed the way I look at everything. And it's a very strange thing, because you wouldn't think that the revelation of the capacity for evil is a precondition for the realization of good. But I believe, first of all, why would you be serious enough to even attempt to pursue the good unless you had some sense of what the consequence was of not doing it? You have to be serious about these sorts of things. It's not the game of a child, right? It's the game of a fully developed adult. And I learned this in part when I had little kids. I wrote a chapter for my new book called Never Let Your Children Do Anything That Makes You Dislike Them. And why was that? And I wrote that after I knew I was a monster. And I thought, I'm going to make sure I like my kids. I'm going to make sure they behave around me so that I like them. Because I'm way bigger than them. And I'm way more cruel than they are. And I've got tricks up my sleeve that they cannot even possibly imagine. And if they irritate me, I will absolutely take it out on them. And if you don't think that you're the sort of person that would do that, then you are the sort of person who is doing it. Sisyphus, and Nietzsche said of Sisyphus, if I remember correctly, that one has to imagine him happy. Well, if there's a rock at the bottom of the hill, then you might as well push it up the hill. And if it rolls back down, well, then you've got something else to do, don't you? To push the damn rock back up the hill. And there's no shortage of rocks to push up the hill, and that's what we're built for anyways. And so let's go out and push some damn boulders up the hill, and then maybe we could have enough self-confidence and enough respect for ourselves that we wouldn't have to turn to hatred and revenge and try to take everything down, because I think that's the alternative. So he's not weak. That's one thing you can say about him. The same idea represented there, right? That's Atlas, who voluntarily takes the world on his shoulders. It's like the idea of Christ taking the sins of the world on his shoulders. It's exactly the same notion, which is the notion that you should be able to recognize in yourself all the horror of humanity and take responsibility for it, because that's what that means. And the thing that's so interesting about that is that if you can recognize in yourself all the horror of humanity, you will instantly have a hell of a lot more respect for yourself than you did before you did that. Because there's some real utility in knowing that you're a monster. Now, and just because you're a monster doesn't mean you have to be a monster, but it's really useful to know that you are one. So, one of the things that Jung knew, and this is something that I find so amazing about his writings, I think something that really distinguishes him, for example, from Joseph Campbell, who talked about following your bliss, is like Jung said very clearly that the first step to enlightenment is the encounter with the shadow. And what he meant by that was, everything horrible that human beings have done was done by human beings, and you're one of them. And so if you don't understand that, and to understand that really means to know how it was that you could have done it. And that's a shattering thing. To try to imagine that, to try to imagine yourself as someone who's engaged in medieval torture, to see how you could in fact do that. You're never the same after you learn that. But being never the same after learning that is unbelievably useful, because when you understand that that's what you're like, then you're a whole different creature. And I don't think, and this is something I did learn from Jung, is that you cannot be a good person until you know how much evil you contain within you. It is not possible. And it's partly because you just don't have any potency. Like, if you're just naive, if you're just nice, if you've never hurt anyone, you've never hurt a fly, you don't have the capability for any of that, why would anyone ever take you seriously? You're a domestic animal at best. If and when tragedy strikes either of us, I hope that one of us is standing when it blows past. And that there's a harshness about that that's unbelievably cruel, because you say, well, if my mother died, I could live. Well, what kind of monster are you exactly? The death of your mother doesn't do you in? Well, it turns out that being a monster is the right thing. So, and that's a rough thing to learn. But it's necessary to learn. Because it also makes you, at some point, for example, as you get older, by the time you're in your mid-20s, something like that, you should start having a relationship with your parents that's approximately one of peers. And you can tell if you have that. So here's a little trick you can use. So you have parents, obviously. They have friends. You probably care what your parents think, I would imagine. Do you care what their friends think of you? And the answer to that is, well, not nearly as much. And so then I would say, well, why do you care what your parents think of you then? They're the same people. You know what I mean? It's just luck of the draw that your parents are someone else's kids' friends. They don't think the same way about them that you do. Well, that's where you see that you have a projection. Right? If by the time you're 30, if what your parents think of you matters more than what, say, a random set of their friends think of you, then you've still got your parents confused with God. That's one way of looking at it. You've still got them confused with an archetype, and you're still a child. And you might think, well, it's pretty damn rude not to think about what your parents think of you anymore, not to care. It's like, yeah, it's kind of rude, but maybe you'll be useful for them when they get old. And that's a much better form of caring. It's like you're going to be independent enough and strong enough and detached enough so that when the power dynamic shifts, which it will, that you'll be the person that can carry things forward. Well, you can't do a better thing for them than that, right? That's the best of all possible outcomes for your parents.